There's a moment in life when you realize something uncomfortable. People don't always disrespect you because they are stronger than you. Sometimes they disrespect you because they have learned that there are no consequences for doing it. They learn that you will keep answering the phone. You will keep explaining yourself. You will keep forgiving. You will keep accepting the same behavior. And every time you tolerate something that violates your self-respect, you teach someone what they can get away with. But today, that changes because you don't need to become aggressive to become powerful. You don't need to shout. You don't need to threaten. You don't need to prove that you're important. You need something much more difficult. You need control over yourself. The kind of control that allows you to remain calm when someone tries to provoke you. The kind of confidence that allows you to say no without feeling guilty. The kind of self-respect that allows you to walk away without begging someone to understand your worth. Because the goal is not to make people afraid of you. The goal is to become a person who is so grounded in self-respect that disrespect simply doesn't have access to you anymore. Think about the most powerful people you've ever encountered. Not necessarily the loudest. Not necessarily the richest. Not necessarily the most intimidating. But the people who could walk into a room and change its energy without saying much. Why? Because their presence communicated something. I know who I am. I know what I accept. And I know what I will walk away from. That is quiet power. And quiet power begins when you stop negotiating with behavior that you already know is unacceptable. If someone constantly interrupts you, you don't have to scream. If someone repeatedly insults you, you don't have to insult them back. If someone tries to manipulate you, you don't have to expose every emotion you're feeling. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply a calm boundary. Don't speak to me that way. And then you stand by it. No 10-minute explanation. No emotional speech. No desperate attempt to make them agree. Just clarity. Because boundaries without consequences are merely requests. And self-respect means you are willing to act when your boundaries are ignored. This is where most people struggle. They want respect, but they are terrified of losing people. So they tolerate. They compromise. They stay silent. They laugh at disrespect because they don't want to create tension. But understand this. Keeping someone close at the cost of losing yourself is not peace. It's self-abandonment. And there comes a point where you have to choose. Do you want everyone to like you? Or do you want to respect yourself? Because you cannot build a powerful life while constantly betraying your own standards just to keep other people comfortable. And this is why emotional control matters. Someone who knows they can trigger you has power over you. If one insult can destroy your mood, if one person's opinion can ruin your entire day, if someone can provoke you into saying something you'll regret, then they don't need to control your life. They only need to control your emotions. Take that power back. Pause. Breathe. Observe. Then decide. You don't have to respond immediately. Silence is not weakness. Sometimes silence is the space between being provoked and choosing your character. And when you master that space, you become difficult to manipulate. People begin to realize something about you. They can disagree with you. They can criticize you. They can walk away. But they cannot easily control you. And that is a different kind of strength. The world teaches you to respond quickly. Defend yourself quickly. Prove yourself quickly. Explain yourself quickly. But maturity teaches you something different. Not everything deserves your reaction. Not every accusation deserves an explanation. Not every insult deserves an answer. Not every person deserves access to your energy. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing. You simply change your behavior. You create distance. You leave the conversation. You stop participating in the pattern. And eventually people understand. Not because you threatened them, but because your actions became consistent. That is how self-respect becomes visible. You don't announce your standards. You live them. You don't tell everyone that you are powerful. You become disciplined enough that your behavior speaks for you. And once you reach that level, something changes inside you. You stop asking, how do I make them respect me? And you start asking, why am I still standing where I am repeatedly disrespected? That question changes everything. Because your power doesn't come from controlling other people. Your power comes from controlling your access to them. You decide who gets your attention. You decide who gets your trust. You decide who gets another chance. You decide when a conversation is over. And you decide when walking away is more powerful than staying. That is quiet power. And when you develop it, you don't need to make people fear you. You become someone they understand they cannot casually disrespect. Not because you're dangerous, because you're disciplined. Not because you're angry, because you're grounded. Not because you're trying to dominate, because you no longer depend on their approval. And that is when your presence changes. You become calmer. Your words become fewer. Your decisions become clearer. Your standards become stronger. And your life becomes quieter. But underneath that quietness is something incredibly powerful. Self-respect. Remember this. You cannot control how people behave. But you can control what you tolerate. You cannot control what people say about you. But you can control whether you believe them. You cannot control who chooses to leave. But you can control whether you abandon yourself trying to make them stay. And you cannot force someone to respect you. But you can refuse to participate in relationships where disrespect has become normal. That is the real secret. Don't spend your life trying to convince people of your worth. Build your character. Build your discipline. Build your confidence. Build your independence. Build a life so meaningful that you don't need to chase validation from people who don't recognize your value. And when someone crosses a line, don't become the person they are trying to provoke. Become the person they didn't expect. Calm, kind, clear, unshaken, pure, unshaken, and willing to walk away. Because the strongest person is not the one who can make others afraid. It is the one who has nothing to prove, nothing to chase, nothing to beg for, and nothing to lose by choosing self-respect. So from today forward, remember this. You don't need to become louder. You need to become clearer. You don't need to become colder. You need stronger boundaries. You don't need to control people. You need to control yourself. And you don't need everyone to respect you. You need to respect yourself so deeply that you stop accepting anything that requires you to betray who you are. That is quiet power. That is self-respect. And once you master it, people don't need to fear you. They simply learn that disrespecting you comes with a consequence they cannot control. Your absence. Let me tell you something most people learn too late. You don't earn respect by demanding it. You earn it by the standards you live by. And the first person who needs to respect those standards is you. Because people are always watching what you tolerate. They may never say it out loud, but they notice. They notice when you say no, and then change your mind because someone gets upset. They notice when someone speaks to you badly and you laugh it off, even though it hurt. They notice when you keep giving chances to someone who keeps crossing the same line. And slowly, without realizing it, you teach people where your boundaries really are. Not by what you say, by what you allow. You can tell someone, respect me 100 times. But if your actions continue to communicate, you can treat me however you want, and I'll still be here. Your words will never carry the weight you want them to have. This is why self-respect has to come before other people's respect. You have to become comfortable disappointing people. That's a difficult lesson. Many people spend their entire lives trying to be liked. They say yes when they want to say no. They stay quiet when they should speak. They accept behavior they know is wrong because they're afraid that standing up for themselves might cost them a relationship, a friendship, a job, or someone's approval. But ask yourself honestly, what is the value of keeping someone in your life if keeping them requires you to keep abandoning yourself? You don't have to become rude. You don't have to become arrogant. You don't have to treat people badly. You simply have to become clear. If something doesn't work for you, say so. If someone crosses a boundary, address it. If someone repeatedly ignores that boundary, change your distance from them. That's it. No dramatic announcement. No angry speech. No need to prove that you're stronger. Just action. Because a boundary without action is only a suggestion. And this is where quiet power begins. You stop explaining every decision. You stop defending every choice. You stop feeling guilty because someone didn't like your answer. Think about how much energy you waste trying to make other people understand you. You explain why you couldn't come. You explain why you said no. You explain why you need space. You explain why something hurt you. You explain yourself again and again, hoping that if you give enough reasons, people will finally approve of your decision. But sometimes you don't need a better explanation. You need stronger conviction. No is a complete sentence. I don't accept that is a complete sentence. I'm not comfortable with this is a complete sentence. I won't continue this conversation if you speak to me like that is a complete sentence. You don't have to turn your boundary into a courtroom argument. And here's something even deeper. The moment you stop needing everyone to agree with your boundaries, your confidence changes. Because confidence isn't walking into a room thinking everyone will like you. Confidence is walking into a room knowing you'll be okay, even if someone doesn't. That's freedom. And once you experience that freedom, you become much harder to manipulate. Someone can't control you by giving you approval because you don't desperately need it. Someone can't control you by withdrawing attention because you don't chase it. Someone can't control you with guilt because you know the difference between being selfish and protecting your peace. You begin to understand that being a good person doesn't mean being available for everyone's demands. Being kind doesn't mean being weak. Being forgiving doesn't mean accepting the same disrespect forever. And being understanding doesn't mean ignoring your own feelings. You can have compassion and still have boundaries. You can forgive someone and still walk away. You can love someone and still refuse to let them mistreat you. That's maturity. And when you start living this way consistently, something interesting happens. You don't have to announce that you've changed. People feel it. The person who used to interrupt you notices that you no longer argue for their attention. The person who used to manipulate you notices that guilt no longer changes your decisions. The person who used to disrespect you notices that you no longer reward disrespect with unlimited access to your time. And suddenly, your silence has meaning. Your no has weight. Your presence has value. Not because you became intimidating, but because you finally became consistent. Remember this. The respect you receive from others often begins with the respect you refuse to compromise within yourself. And once you understand that respect begins with the standards you set for yourself, you discover another kind of power. The power to remain calm when someone is trying to make you lose control. Because here's the truth. Anyone can be calm when everything is going their way. Real strength is staying calm when someone is deliberately pushing your buttons. Someone says something disrespectful. They question your intelligence. They criticize you in front of others. They try to embarrass you. They raise their voice. They want you to react. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can give them exactly what they're looking for, or you can pause. That pause may look small from the outside, but internally, it is one of the most powerful things you can develop. Because between what someone does and how you respond, there is a moment where you get to choose who you are going to be. Most people surrender that moment. Someone insults them, and they insult back. Someone raises their voice, and they raise theirs. Someone becomes disrespectful, and suddenly they forget every principle they claim to live by. They react. And afterward they say, "They made me angry." But understand something. No one can force you to give away your emotional control. They can provoke you. They can pressure you. They can disappoint you. But your reaction still belongs to you. And when you understand that, you stop handing strangers the remote control to your emotions. You become slower to react and faster to observe. You listen, you breathe, you think, then you decide. That's quiet power. You don't have to win every argument. You don't have to have the last word. You don't have to prove that you're right every time someone challenges you. Sometimes, walking away from an argument is not weakness. It's wisdom. Because what is the point of winning a conversation if you lose your peace in the process? Think about how often people become exhausted because they are constantly trying to defend themselves. Someone says something online. They respond. Someone misunderstands them. And do not answer need I. They write a long explanation. Someone criticizes them. They spend hours trying to prove the person wrong. Someone doesn't appreciate them. They desperately try to change their opinion. And suddenly their entire emotional state depends on what other people are saying. That's not freedom. Freedom is being able to hear something you don't like without immediately becoming something you don't like. That's emotional discipline. And emotional discipline doesn't mean you don't feel anger. It means anger doesn't decide your behavior. You can feel the emotion without becoming the emotion. You can be angry and still speak calmly. You can be hurt and still maintain your dignity. You can disagree without becoming disrespectful. You can say, "I don't accept this," without screaming. And sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect is a quiet look, a calm sentence, and the decision to remove yourself. You don't need to match someone's energy. You need to protect your own. Because if someone is chaotic and you become chaotic with them, you've allowed their behavior to determine your character. Don't do that. Let them be loud. You stay clear. Let them be emotional. You stay grounded. Let them misunderstand you. You don't have to chase them with explanations. Let them provoke you. You don't have to give them the reaction they came looking for. This is how you become difficult to manipulate. People eventually learn that pressing your buttons doesn't work. And when they realize they cannot control your emotions, they lose one of the easiest ways to control you. Your calm becomes your boundary. Your silence becomes your answer. Your composure becomes your strength. But understand, silence doesn't mean you accept disrespect. There are moments when you should speak. There are moments when you should say clearly and directly, "That is not acceptable." The difference is that you say it without losing yourself. You don't need anger to make a boundary powerful. You need consistency. And when you speak from a place of calm confidence, people hear something different. They don't hear desperation. They don't hear insecurity. They hear certainty. You know what you will tolerate. You know what you won't tolerate. And you're not trying to intimidate anyone into understanding. You're simply making your position clear. That's the difference between emotional reaction and emotional control. Reaction says, "You made me lose control." Control says, "You may have disturbed me, but you don't get to decide what I do next." That is a completely different level of strength. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, don't rush. Take a breath. Let the moment pass through you. Ask yourself, what response would make me proud of myself tomorrow? Then choose that response. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to become the person someone else is trying to turn you into. Stay calm. Stay clear. And never give another person the power to control your character through your emotions. And when you learn to control your emotions, something even more important begins to happen. You stop trying to control other people. You stop asking, "How can I make them respect me?" And you start asking a much more powerful question. Am I willing to walk away from what disrespects me? Because sometimes the strongest boundary you can create is not a warning. It's distance. It's the ability to leave. Think about that for a moment. If you know you can walk away, you become much harder to manipulate. If you know you can stand alone, you become much harder to pressure. If you know you don't need someone's approval, you become much harder to control. And this is where real independence begins. Not when you stop caring about people, but when you stop needing people to validate your worth. You can care deeply about someone and still know when enough is enough. You can love someone and still refuse to live in a relationship where you're constantly being diminished. You can respect someone's position and still decide that their behavior doesn't belong in your life. Walking away isn't always about anger. Sometimes it's about clarity. You finally see the pattern. You see the repeated disrespect. You see the broken promises. You see the manipulation. You see the excuses. And instead of having another argument about it, you simply make a decision. I don't want this in my life anymore. No revenge. No dramatic goodbye. No need to make them suffer. You simply remove yourself. That is a level of power many people never develop because they are too attached to being understood. They want the other person to admit they were wrong. They want an apology. They want an explanation. They want closure. But sometimes closure doesn't come from another person's words. Sometimes closure comes from your own decision. You decide that you've seen enough. You decide that you've learned enough. You decide that your peace is worth protecting. And you move forward. That's when something changes inside you. You stop negotiating with behavior that repeatedly hurts you. You stop giving unlimited access to people who continuously disrespect your boundaries. You stop confusing loyalty with self-sacrifice. And you stop believing that walking away means you failed. Sometimes walking away is the moment you finally win yourself back. Because what is success if you have everything except peace? What is the point of being respected by strangers if you don't respect yourself when you're alone? What is the value of keeping someone in your life if their presence constantly makes you question your own worth? Your life is too valuable to spend it proving that you're worthy of basic respect. You shouldn't have to convince someone to treat you well. You shouldn't have to beg someone to listen. You shouldn't have to repeatedly explain why disrespect hurts. At some point, your responsibility is no longer to convince them. Your responsibility is to decide what you will do next. And your next step should come from self-respect, not revenge. This distinction matters. Revenge says, I want you to hurt because you hurt me. Self-respect says, I won't allow this to continue. Revenge keeps you emotionally connected to the person. Self-respect sets you free from them. One keeps you looking backward. The other allows you to move forward. So choose freedom. Build a life that doesn't depend on one person's attention. Build your confidence. Build your skills. Build your health. Build your character. Build your financial independence. Build meaningful relationships. Build something that makes you proud when nobody is watching. Because the more complete your life becomes, the less desperate you become for approval. And the less desperate you are for approval, the more difficult you become to manipulate. You no longer accept disrespect simply because you're afraid of being alone. You no longer stay in bad situations because you're afraid of starting again. You no longer chase people who have already shown you that they don't value your presence. You understand something very simple. Being alone is better than being surrounded by people who make you feel alone. And when you truly understand that, your standards rise naturally. You don't become arrogant. You become selective. You don't hate people. You simply become careful about who gets access to your time, your energy, your trust, and your peace. And people notice. They notice that you're no longer available for every argument. They notice that you don't chase every person who walks away. They notice that you don't beg for attention. They notice that your no actually means no. They notice that when someone crosses a serious boundary, you don't spend months threatening to leave. You leave. That consistency creates a different kind of presence. People don't need to fear you. They simply understand that your standards are real. And that's what makes quiet power so strong. You don't have to announce your boundaries. You live them. You don't have to tell everyone you're confident. Your decisions show it. You don't have to demand respect. You become the kind of person who refuses to participate in disrespect. And perhaps the greatest transformation is this. You stop measuring your worth by how other people treat you. Someone can misunderstand you. You still know who you are. Someone can reject you. You still know your value. Someone can criticize you. You can listen without allowing their opinion to become your identity. Someone can walk away. You can let them go without abandoning yourself. Because your worth was never theirs to give. And it was never theirs to take away. So from this day forward, don't focus on making people fear disrespecting you. Focus on becoming so grounded in yourself that disrespect no longer determines your behavior, your mood, or your direction. Set your standards. Control your emotions. Protect your peace. And when someone repeatedly crosses the line, have the courage to walk away. Because the ultimate form of quiet power is knowing you can leave without losing yourself. So remember this. You don't need to become intimidating to become powerful. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. Your power begins the moment you decide that your peace, your dignity, and your self-respect are no longer negotiable. Set your standards. Control your reactions. Protect your energy. And when someone repeatedly crosses the line, don't waste your life trying to convince them to respect you. Show them through your actions that you respect yourself enough to walk away. Let your silence be calm. Let your boundaries be clear. Let your absence speak when your words are no longer enough. Because the goal was never to make people afraid of you. The goal was to become someone who no longer fears losing people who don't respect you. And when you reach that place, you won't need to demand respect. You will carry it with you. Walk quietly. Stand firmly. And never abandon yourself just to keep someone else.